I'm Kay Crawford, and I'm a member of the Al-Anon family group. And being a good Al-Anon, I've got to correct your story. I answered the phone. Yeah, I had to get that straight. Yeah, I answered the phone and knew it was Brad, and I said, "Okay, Brad, here's Bill." You know, Bill took the phone, and then he says he wants to talk to you. And then Brad asked me if I would be willing to come and share at the primary purpose group down here in Southern Pines. And I said, "Isn't that an AA group?" And he said, "Yes, it is, but we have Al-Anon speakers every once in a while." And I said, "Okay, if it's okay, I will come." And it reminded me of my old hero who was in Al-Anon, and she was in Al-Anon before there was an Al-Anon. She used to say, for every alcoholic, there's somebody in their lives like me who wanted to help, but we couldn't. We couldn't. We just couldn't. We tried, but we just couldn't help. Now, when I tell my story, I'm going to tell you what alcoholism did to me. And I want you to know right off the bat, I love my husband with all my heart and with all my soul. I've always loved him. Even when I hated him, I still loved him. Now, I could tell my next door neighbor that, or one of the ladies I play golf with, or somebody in my Sunday school class, and they would not know, they would not understand what I was talking about. But anybody who's ever lived with and loved an alcoholic knows what I'm saying. I didn't know anything about alcoholism growing up. Both my parents were, I can't say that they were teetotalers because there was alcohol in my home early, but it never interfered with our lives in any way. I'm an only child, and I used to say, well, to be honest, my dad spoiled me. You know, he gave me everything that I ever wanted. And my mother and daddy didn't have a whole lot either. My mother was probably the most spiritual person that I've ever known. She talked about God and what God did for her, and her faith in God from as far back as I can remember. Now, my mother never heard of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon, but there was something coming up very special in my life, and I was talking to my mom about it, and I said, "You know, Mama, I don't know whether to pray for this or not." And she said, "Kay, you don't have to pray for things. God knows what you want and what you need. All you have to do is pray for the knowledge of God's will. Pray for God's will in your life." My mother never heard of the 11th step of Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous. And my mother had a program, and she found it in her church. She was a good woman. She was, I think, a very beautiful woman in her early life. She never had a whole lot, but everything she had, she loved and she cherished. And I hope to get there someday. My dad was a very kind and gentle man. I don't know of anybody who didn't respect and love my dad. And he loved his family very much. And I think the reason he loved his family so much is when he was 6 months old, both his parents died in the flu epidemic of 1918. And he and his older sister was raised by his grandmother. And his grandmother also took in 4 other of my dad's cousins who were left without parents, or the parents they were very sick. And so she had a house full of children to raise. And they came up hard. So I think that's the reason my dad's family meant so much to him. He loved us so much, and I felt that love from the very start, from the very beginning. Now, I can't say that I didn't know anything. I didn't know what drinking was, because one night my mother and I were sitting on the porch, and we were in a small neighborhood. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew the families, the cousins, the aunts and uncles, the grandparents. It was just a close-knit neighborhood. And Mother and I were sitting out on the porch, and this was before air conditioning, and it was in the summertime, and I looked across the street, and the man across the street came out on the porch with a shotgun, and followed by his wife, his mother-in-law, his sister-in-law, and his son. And I said, Mother, what is going on? And she said, Joe's drunk again. And so, I knew Joe, and I knew that he was not like that. I knew that this was absolutely not like him. He was the guy in the neighborhood who would dress up like Santa Claus every year and come around and ask all the children what they wanted for Christmas. Everybody loved Joe. They used to say about Joe, he's a good guy if he just didn't drink. He was a good guy, but he was an alcoholic. And on Saturday night, he turned into a monster. That's alcoholism. But I didn't think anything like that was ever going to happen to me. And I also had an uncle. Actually, he was my mother's uncle, so I guess he was my great uncle. And he was married, he had a family, he had 3 girls and a boy and a wife who loved him very much. He was an auto mechanic, and he could fix a car. This was way before the computers in cars, and he could drive a car and tell if there's anything wrong with it. He was a talented mechanic, but he couldn't stay sober. And on a time when it was really bad for the family would call the preacher over. The preacher would come over and pray over him. I think this was way before Alcoholics Anonymous came to Greensboro. But the preacher would pray over him and ask him to come to church the next Sunday, and he would go and get saved, and then he would stay sober as long as he could. And he'd drink again. That's alcoholism. And I wasn't going to have to deal with that. I didn't think I'd ever have to deal with that. Well, I grew up in the late 40s and early 50s, listening to rock and roll and rhythm and blues. I learned how to dance when I was in the 6th grade, listening to 60-Minute Man. They call it, it's beach music now, but I like that old black music. Billy Ward and the Dominoes, Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, all those good beach music guys. And I loved to dance, and if there was a football game at high school or a basketball game or whatever it was, I went to that just to go to the dance afterwards. I love to dance. Still love to dance. And I thought, when I die, I want on my tombstone, she loved to dance. Well, in my senior year of high school, a life-changing event happened to me. I was in art class, and I had been in that class half the year, I guess. This was a very loose class. This is where you could talk while you were doing your little projects and all. And the teacher had a couple of us girls up in front of the class posing as the rest of the class sketched us. And I was standing up there, minding my own business, and I heard a voice over to my side say, "Well, I guess I'll draw her boobs now." And my life changed. I fell in love. I'm sure it would be called sexual harassment today, but I thought it was a compliment. Well, I thought he had never asked me for a date. I ended up being where he was before he even got there. And there came a time when the girls could ask the boys, it was legal for the girls to ask the boys to go to this dance. And I asked him, or I put his name on the card, and he agreed to go. And I can remember we double dated that night. And I don't remember who we double dated with, but I remember going to the old Shrine Club on the High Point Road. We just passed it coming over to pick up Jackie and Howard tonight. And Bill looks over there and says, that's where it all began. But I remember that dance. I remember going into that dance and dancing and just having a great time. And then Bill and a couple of the boys would go out to the car. I knew where they were going. They were going to pass a bottle around. But that was okay. When he got back into the dance, he paid me a little more attention. And we danced a little more. He was funnier, life of the party. He was everything that I wasn't. And I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? Anyway, that dance started it all, and we started dating. And I had other boyfriends in school, but I was zeroed in on him for some reason. But he was, like I said, he was everything that I wasn't. He was outgoing. He was funny, and I say nowadays that he was hip, slick, and cool. Now, y'all may not know what that means. He's sitting right over there, though. He's the love of my life. Well, life went on, and we dated off and on, and he joined the service, and then I thought I'd never see him again. And while he was in service, I got a letter from him. And he said, "Dear Kay, will you marry me?" And it was written on notebook paper, lined notebook paper. And you know what my answer was. So on my 20th birthday, I was engaged and to be married the next year. And it just so happened the next year when he was in service, when he was able to get a leave, it was on my birthday. So he came home 2 weeks before the wedding. And, when he left to go to the service, I knew he drank. And I knew he drank a lot. But everybody that we knew did. All of our friends did. So, I was going to take care of that. When we got married, I was going to take care of that. I thought I had that power. But anyway, he came home, and I picked him up at the train station. And we were sitting out in front of the train station, and he was starting to make noises like, "Kay, I don't need to get married. What do I want to get married for? My friends are telling me I'm too young to get married. What, Kay?" And I listened to that. But folks, I had a year to plan a wedding, and there was gonna be a wedding. I could have no more called that wedding off than I could fly. I was talking somewhere one time, and this little girl came up to me with tears running down her cheeks. And she said, "I just called my wedding off because of his drinking." I couldn't have done that. I could not have done that. I didn't have it in me. I thought I was the only person in the world that was living like that. We got married on my birthday, September the 19th, 1959. And when I walked down that aisle at Magnolia Street Baptist Church in Greensboro, North Carolina, I knew that something was robbing me of my husband's love and devotion. I didn't know what it was then, but I know now that it was alcoholism. And you know, his drinking became a problem to me a long time before it became a problem to him. And I started fighting it every way I knew how to fight it. I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I didn't know it was a disease. I didn't know it was a family disease, and I didn't know it was progressive. So when we got married, he was still in service, and we moved to Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. And I noticed then how much the drinking had progressed. And I started immediately trying to make it stop. The more he drank, the sicker I became. I thought that I could say the magic words and he would understand. I nearly drove myself crazy trying to make somebody else stop drinking. We were in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and I would look around and I would see other couples with young children, and I would think, that's what we need. We need a child. If we had a child, he would have to stop drinking then. And so we had Steve. And the night I went into labor, and he took me to the hospital, and this was when the dads could not go in anywhere where the mothers were delivering. And I was in hard labor, and he took me, I don't know what time it was, but it was around midnight, I guess. This sweet little nurse came over and asked me if I was Miss Crawford, and I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, I just left your husband at the NCO club, and he wanted me to check on you. Well, I'll guarantee you folks, had I not been in hard labor, there would have been some hair pulling there. Because that's what I had become. I had become an angry, bitter, ugly, pitiful human being. And Steve was born in 1961. 11 months later, Kelly was born. But we happened to be in Greensboro at that time. Bill was discharged from the service. And the night he took me to the hospital to deliver Kelly, I was 24 years old. We had a son 11 months old. And it was on February the 1st, February the 2nd, that he took me to the hospital. And on February the 5th, I was trying to explain to my parents, who had come to see their only daughter and their only granddaughter, I was trying to explain to them why my husband was not there and had not been there since he dropped me off at the hospital. You know, I didn't know then why I was in that position. I wondered. I had tried my best to be a good mother, a good wife. I had tried to be a good person. I didn't know then why I was in that predicament, but I know now that it was because of alcoholism. It was because of alcoholism. So that little girl who liked to dance had turned into this ugly, bitter, angry person. I thought I was the only person in the world who had to live like this. I'd like to explain to you how sick I had become. You know, I was married to a man who I was sure did not love me. If everybody knows, if he loved me, he would quit drinking. I hear some giggles. I know you know what I mean. I thought that. I really thought that. And I was married to a man who I could not depend on financially. I could not depend on him to come home. I could not depend on him emotionally. He was just not there. And you will be surprised at my biggest fear. My biggest fear was that some other woman would come along and take him away from me. Now, folks, that is sick, and I know that's sick. So, and I know that I don't ever have to go there again. I knew of a person who was in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you've ever heard Bill's story, you know how I know that. I had his name and number. And I got enough courage one night to dial that number again. And I had enough courage that night to let somebody answer. I had dialed it many times and hung up before someone had answered because I just didn't have the courage to call. But that night I did. It was no different from any other night. And a man named Bill, and I told him, I said, my husband has a problem with alcoholism, and I want you to let me know if there's anything I can do to help him stop drinking. And he kind of chuckled a little bit, and he said, no, hon. He says, we got to wait till he's ready. And so he says, but my wife goes to something called Al-Anon, and you might be interested in going with her. And so he put Liv on the phone, and she invited me to come. Now, I didn't know what Al-Anon was. I had heard of AA. We had been counseling with our minister, and he had suggested AA for Bill, but he didn't have anything to suggest for me. And this is the first time somebody had suggested something for me. And so Liv was on the phone, and she had the calmest voice I believe I've ever heard. She was so calm. You know, I was used to yelling and screaming. But she was very calm, and she asked me to come, and she says, I know, I understand. And it was on Wednesday. At that time, there were only 2 meetings in Greensboro. A discussion meeting on Tuesday night and a speaker meeting on Wednesday night. And she happened to go to the speaker meeting, and I could not wait to get there because I knew that I was going to go up there and they were going to tell me what to do to come home and to zap him and get him sober. Well, that's been a long time ago, and nobody's ever told me how to get somebody sober. But they told me how to get me well. I walked up to that in that meeting, and it was upstairs in an old dingy office building. But when I got up to the head of those stairs, those women greeted me with open arms. There were Sue and Betty and Winnie and Edna and Isabel and several others that are not with us anymore. This group was actually called the AA Auxiliary at the time. But it was doing Al-Anon. It had adopted the program of Al-Anon. But it was still named the AA Auxiliary. And several years later, they changed the name to the Central Al-Anon group. That group is still going today. But those women, they you know, I guess I cried for the first 6 or 8 meetings that I ever went to. And they told me that was all right. We'll cry with you. See, they loved me in recovery. They were not demanding of me. They let me go at my own pace. And that's what I needed. I needed to go at a slow pace because I was a very sick girl. But they told me that, I guess the best thing that they told me was that it was not my fault. I had thought for years that he drank because of me, because it was something I was not doing or something that I was doing and I wasn't supposed to. I thought it was my fault. And they told me, had you never met him, he would still be an alcoholic. And that was comforting for me. I remember the first time I heard the 12 steps. I thought, isn't that nice? They're reminding us what those alcoholics are supposed to do to get sober. Thank God I stayed long enough to realize that those steps were for me. They were for me to put back together a life that was almost destroyed by someone else's drinking. I remember the first inventory I took. it was really nothing. It was very superficial, but it was a start. Later on, I was able to get down deep inside and realize that there was a lot of things that I was doing that was making my life miserable. I was probably the most jealous person in the world. I was not only jealous of my husband, but I was jealous of you too. I was self-righteous, so self-righteous. It was awful. I was possessive. I would possess you. If I loved you, I would possess you and kill all the love that you would ever have for me. But thank God I stayed long enough that I knew that I had to start changing. I was a very controlling person, and I'm still controlling. And I work on it all the time. I work on it. I really do. Well, those two little children we had, Steve was the oldest, Kelly was the youngest. They grew up to be teenagers. And Steve was out with we called them the homeboys. They were a group of boys in the neighborhood that kind of hung together. And he came home one night and I smelled beer. And I'd been in Al-Anon probably at least 10 years at that time. Every bit of Al-Anon I ever had went right out the window. But I started asking him the same questions I used to ask his dad. Where have you been? Who have you been with? And how much have you had to drink? I bet I've asked those questions 1,000,000 times. I never have gotten an answer from him. But you know what I had to do? I had a program then. I had to call my sponsor. I had to read that literature, and I had to go to meetings, and I had to pray my prayers. And it wasn't too long after that. Actually, it was when Kelly was, when the night she graduated from high school. And I need to explain to you about Kelly, our daughter. She was born marching to a different drummer. She has always been different. And to make a very long story short, this was after a lot of tears, a lot of crying, a lot of unacceptable behavior. I could go on and on and on. A lot of lying. It was just a lot of mess that it was disrupting our family. I had to ask Kelly to leave. And that was probably the hardest thing that I have ever done in my life, is ask our daughter to leave our home. But I had a program. And I knew that I had to call my sponsor, and I had to pray my prayers, and I had to read that literature, and I had to go to as many meetings as I could. And I got through that. Now, Kelly and our relationship healed after that. When she got married, we got together, and we never disrupted our communication. We continued to have communication all through that time. And but our relationship healed when she got married, and she was, as far as we knew, doing real good. And then the straw that broke the camel's back happened. Bill was just, I usually forget to say that he did get sober. You know, he did come in and get sober, and we had, it was a wonderful life. We were on a pink cloud for so long, and then life hits you in the face. It really hits you in the face. I used to think before Bill got sober, if he would just quit drinking, everything would be all right. I knew it, if he would just quit drinking. Well, there was sobriety in our home, but everything didn't get perfect overnight. And he was doing a great job in AA, and I was attending Al-Anon. I was the North Carolina State Treasurer for the Al-Anon State Convention for 4 years. I was just doing a great job. And he came home one day, and said, Kay, I don't know if I love you anymore. And I thought I was going to die. I could feel my heart break. The thing that happened was going to happen. I had feared it since I walked down that aisle at Magnolia Street Baptist Church. He was going to leave. And so he left for a while. And sometimes I forget to say that he came back, but he did. We mutually agreed to get back together. But you know what I had to do? I had to call my sponsor. And I had to go to meetings. And I had to read that literature. And I had to pray my prayers. And I did a lot of it. But that separation was necessary for our marriage. Because, see, I had depended on him for so long for my happiness. I had looked at another person to make me happy. And I had told many women in the program, you cannot depend on another person for your happiness. And here I was faced with that. So we mutually agreed to go back together and to work on our marriage, and that's what we did. That separation was very necessary for us. I guess for the last, I came into Al-Anon in February of 1967. And I guess from sometime in 1982, our marriage has been something that sometimes I have to pinch myself to realize how good it is. But it was necessary for me. After that separation, I realized that I had to get a life for me. He had a life. I didn't. I didn't do anything. I was just I just had no life at all. So I started doing things to make me happy. Our program tells us that we've got to make ourselves happy. We've got to do what's right for us. So I started looking for things to do. I can remember in high school I liked to draw, in that art class. So I enrolled in an art class at one of the community colleges. And I took it long enough to realize that I did not have any talent at drawing. But I was doing something. I was doing something to make my life better. And also, when I was young, my mother gave me piano lessons, but I didn't keep it up. And I thought, well, why don't I buy me a piano and start taking piano lessons? So I did that. And at the community college, and I had a ball doing it. I had a great time. I met some nice people, and I had fun doing it. But I found out I didn't have any talent playing the piano either. For some reason, you got to put the right hand with the left hand, and I couldn't do that. But I was doing something for me. And then one day, Bill was reading the paper, and he was in a Sunday school class at the church, and a lot of the guys in there played golf. And he said, you want to take golf lessons? And I said, yeah, let's go take some golf lessons. Well, we enrolled. It was a private lesson with this golf pro. And we took a series of 6 lessons, I think. And I can remember after that, we would go play 9 holes here and there, And I looked over there one time, and Bill was putting with a 9-iron. I said, why are you putting with your 9-iron? He said, I can do just as good with a 9-iron as I can a putter. But anyway, I can remember the pro. And he doesn't mind me telling this either. The pro, when we were taking those lessons, he spent most of the time with Bill, because he would say, look at her, see what she's doing, do it like that. But I found something that I could do. I could play golf, and I enjoy it. I'm in 2 golf leagues now, and if the weather's good and we're in town, our best friends, Jack and Howard, we will play on Fridays. So, it's been a good life for me. Well, excuse me. I am active in Al-Anon. I still attend Al-Anon, and I sponsor people. Al-Anon has promises, just like AA has promises. And the one that means the most to me is that we will be able to love others without losing ourselves. You see, that's what happened to me. I loved so much that I lost me. Now, I need to tell you about Kelly and Steve. Steve is our oldest. They were both raised in the same house, by the same parents, by the same grandparents. They were both given the same opportunities. They were both taught the same values. One made good choices, and the other one made bad choices. Our son, after he got through the teenage years, he started making good choices. He met and married one of the sweetest girls that I know. I didn't think my son could pick anybody that I would approve of. That's how mamas are. Well, she is, and I am grateful for her. I am closer to her than I am my own daughter. And they've given us 4 handsome boys, and they're all good boys. Wise choices. He and Susie have, I think last year or the year before, they just celebrated 25 years of marriage, and they're more in love today than they've ever been. Wise choices. My daughter, on the other hand, did not make wise choices. Now, I need to tell you about Kelly. Kelly's a good girl. She is attractive. She's funny. You can't be around her 5 minutes until you're laughing. Everybody who meets her just loves her to death. She's a good person. She just makes bad choices. When we moved back to Greensboro, she kind of distanced herself from us. We didn't see a whole lot of her. And when we did see her, she lost a lot of weight. She was just really, really in bad shape. And we thought, well, she's working too hard. And then our son, Steve, said, Mom, there's something wrong with Kelly. So he got, by this time she had left her husband. They were separated. So he called her ex-husband and said, what's going on with Kelly? And he said, Kelly's on cocaine. And so that devastated us. It all made sense then. And Bill, he has all these diplomas. When he was working, he had all these diplomas on the back of his wall. Substance abuse. He knew everything about alcoholism and substance abuse. I'd been in Al-Anon for all these years. He had been in AA all these years. We knew everything about alcoholism and substance abuse. We knew it all. But we didn't see it in her. And so we did what we could. We did an intervention. She went to treatment, came out, and stayed sober for us. She would attend meetings just to be counted present. And she picked up a 9-month chip, but she mentioned later, she told us later that she would have been drinking then. And so life went on, and it didn't get any better for Kelly. She had to go down. And I can remember the day she called me on the phone crying, saying that she had been evicted from her house where she was living. And thank God I was able to say, honey, I am so sorry you have to go through this, but I know you'll figure something out. And you know she did? It was not that day, it was not that week or that month, but in time, she got herself straightened out. And now she calls me. She used to call me every day, but it's dropped down now to about every week or so. But I know she's okay. I can tell it in her voice. I don't know if she's going to meetings or not. It's none of my business. But I know that her life is manageable now. And that's all I want. That's all I want for her, is to be happy and for her life to be manageable. And I learned that in Al-Anon. Well, because of this program, I've been able to get my life back. I've got that little girl who loved to dance back, and I'm so grateful for that. And they told me early on, when I first came into the program, for me to keep it, I've got to give it away. Now, that didn't make much sense to me then. It does now. For me to keep the peace and the serenity of this program, I've got to share it with somebody else. And when a new person comes into Al-Anon now, the first couple of nights they're crying, and they're so sad and so sad. They keep coming, and the day they come in, you can look in their eyes and tell that there's somebody home. And you know that the program's working in their life, and you know that God is working in their life. And if I don't go to meetings, I'm going to miss that. And I really don't want to miss that. I love AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, with all my heart, because Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a sober husband. And I love Al-Anon because Al-Anon gave me back me. And I'm going to wrap it up now with something that I like to end all my talks with. It's some kind words, some nice words that I heard someone say. They're not in the program, but it's someone I've respected very much. It says, live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak truthfully, pray daily, and leave the rest to God. Thank you.